Hi, Kristian.
Hi, Brit.
I'm Brit the co-author of The Superhuman Minds, and this is the Superhuman Minds YouTube channel.
And I'm Christian Marlowe, and here's a copy of our book to look at, Superhuman Mind.
So today's topic is depression, or more specifically, antidepressants. So the most prescribed antidepressant is the SSRI, so the one that works on serotonin. In particular, it works to prevent the serotonin from being absorbed back into the neurons because the serotonin has to stay outside of the neurons to work. And what's interesting, of course, about these SSRIs is that it's not that we have a good mechanism where we know that, oh, that is why people are depressed. Rather, people discovered these SSRIs and other similar drugs, and then they concluded that that must be why people are depressed, that the serotonin is out of whack. What do you think about that, Kristen?
Well, I mean, and then they kind of did some follow-up research and have now established that the serotonin system is, in fact, responsible for a lot of depressive symptoms.
Yeah, so later they sort of confirmed that. It turns out, though, that many people have a combination of neurotransmitters that don't work fully the way they should. So even though most people take SSRIs if they are depressed, they are not all they don't all have a serotonin disorder. Sometimes if they have a problem with dopamine, sometimes they have a problem with norepinephrine, which is another neurotransmitter in the brain that is similar to dopamine. And so sometimes it's a combination of factors, and some of the results show that the SSRIs don't work very well. Do you have any information about that, Kristen?
Well, I mean, I know that for some people, one type of SSRI tends to work better than others. So I had one friend back in grad school who went through multiple series of drugs, and then she found one that seemed to hit the spot, and that's what is interesting to me is why such a small difference between or among different drugs could have such a great effect on a person.
Yeah, so it might be worth actually switching from one SSRI to another if one doesn't work. It could, of course, be that they're not all targeting just serotonin. Some of them have mild affinities for other receptors, and so it might be worth playing around with that if one SSRI does not work. But sometimes people have gone through most of the SSRIs and they get a partial response, or they get no response, or they get a partial response or a good response for a while, and then the drug seems to stop working. And that, of course, is something that we see with all kinds of drugs that they can stop working. But when you get a partial response, of course, you can switch to a completely different group of drugs. But another way that doctors sort of deal with that situation is to augment the SSRI, which means they will add another drug to the SSRI that can sort of supplement or help out the effect of that drug. So that was sort of one of the things that we wanted to talk about today. So serotonin is one neurotransmitter, and serotonin, of course, is seems to have to do with mood, but not all depression is just mood related. There's obviously also the forms of depressions that are much more energy related. So I know you talked about that, that sometimes people just it's not necessarily just mood, but also that people have difficulties getting out of bed. They have difficulties getting the energy level up to really do anything, which can also be a form of depression.
Well, and how do you parse out? I mean, what is clinical depression that needs to be treated, and depression caused by some depressive event in your life, something like a death in the family, or financial problem or something like that.
Yeah, so if it's a clinical depression in the standard sense, it doesn't have a known cause. It doesn't mean it can't have a cause, of course. So you might have had a horrible childhood, and that might have given rise to a number of things that eventually give rise to depression, but it doesn't have a known sort of immediate cause. And then you have depression that might be caused by, say, a death in the family, or a breakup, or the loss of a job, or a bunch of bad grades in college. And that can just have the very same symptoms. And it can also have the very same chemical profile. So the main difference is that in one case, there is a cause, right? So that you could potentially work on. And in the other case, there's not a known cause, so you cannot obviously work on that cause. And so let's say you have a bunch of bad grades in college, you can perhaps go study a little bit more, and maybe your depression will go away. But it may also be that in order for you to study a little more, you might have to treat the depression first.
Or it could be that studying causes even greater depression. But
that could be it too, yes. But in many cases, I think that it's not a bad idea for people to treat it in the same way. It may be that if it's the loss of a family member, that you might want to just treat the depression for a while, and it could just be sort of a help to get through that grief. But I would still approach it in the same way if it's something that is debilitating enough that you can't function, or that you feel that you're not functioning optimally.
And I think that's very important for people to know, is that seeking treatment doesn't mean that you're going to be hooked on something your whole life, because a lot of people are worried that, I don't want to start some sort of, I don't want to take any mind-altering medication because I'll be addicted to it for my whole life and I'll never be happy again. But there's many instances where people, they'll use it to get over some hump that they can't get over themselves, and then along with therapy or other methods, they can taper off later.
Yes, and that of course applies to a lot of other medications too. So there are some results, for instance, with Ritalin, that when kids have taken Ritalin, in some instances it's rare, but in some instances they can taper it off later on, and they can take smaller doses later on. Because Ritalin, in a recent study I just read, that was done with Ritalin, seems to actually provoke or cause the brain to help produce some of those neurotransmitters that are needed for ADHD not to happen. So it hasn't been done with other treatments like Adderall, but there's some results that indicate that taking medication sometimes can not. It's not necessarily that it will make your brain stop producing the chemicals or will downregulate the receptors. There are cases where it will actually make the brain produce more receptors, or actually sort of stabilize the brain. So it's definitely worth thinking of it in that way, that it's not necessarily forever, that you're taking a mind-altering drug, and it's not super mind-altering. You can also think of it as, wait a minute, I'm depressed, that's not me. So in that sense, maybe it's not mind-altering, maybe it's the depression that's mind-altering, and the drug that makes you come back to who you really were before you became depressed.
So what is the kind of the method of seeking out treatment? I mean, how does a doctor or clinician decide what drug to put you on, and I mean, what things are available?
Yeah, so if it's an SSRI, the serotonin, the standard serotonin antidepressant that you want, your general physician can and will prescribe it typically. Which drug they actually suggest will be rather random in my experience. So it happens to be the case that some doctors have good experiences with one drug for some of their previous patients, and so they will pick, say, Zoloft or Lexapro, unless you have done some research and you come and say, no, I really want to try out Lexapro as opposed to Zoloft, and it might be a good idea to do some research before you go. And most of the drugs that you can get to augment or to sort of supplement the SSRIs are also drugs that your general physician can actually prescribe and will be able to prescribe, be willing to prescribe. So you don't seek specialists to do that. It sort of depends what it is that you need. If you have an extreme problem with energy, and let's say that what you really need is Ritalin or Adderall as a supplement to the SSRI, you might need a specialist in order for that to be prescribed. But there are other things that you can use that could help out the antidepressants. And we want to talk a little bit about those, but there are also over-the-counter medications that some people have some success with in terms of they will stay on their antidepressant, but then they will take the over-the-counter supplements. So if we start with the over-the-counter supplements, since they might be easier, they might also be more expensive depending on your health insurance. But one drug that has received a lot of the people raving about is SAMe. This is really something that the body produces naturally, and it's not an essential. It's not an essential chemical in the sense that the body produces it itself. But there are situations where you actually have deficiencies in this SAMe. They found recently that people who they looked at after they died, who had suffered from Alzheimer's, had deficiencies in that drug. There are other things that they also found that they also had deficiencies in the vitamin B12. But this is a drug that's actually many books out there that show that if you are on an antidepressant and you take this, that it can actually have some beneficial effects because you might be deficient in that particular drug. And that's over the counter, which means you can order it on Amazon.com, for example. And then, of course, as that we have written about in our book, The Superhuman Minds, the Lacuna pruriens, and that is basically a form of dopamine, except it's in a form that can enter the brain. So if you just gave people dopamine, it would not enter the brain, but this contains L-DOPA. And L-DOPA really turns into dopamine in the brain, or works like dopamine in the brain. So that can work for the kinds of condition where people simply lack energy. Although, Kristian, you mentioned that it can also have some problems.
I was curious about that because a lot of people take it for energy as opposed to coffee or other stimulants, and I noticed that I took it a couple times and I have a crash from it. So I'd have a afternoon crash and I'd be pretty productive during the day, but then the nap I'd have to take would kind of wipe out the productivity. So I just stopped taking that. But
yeah,
good old fashioned coffee does a trick.
And that may not be too strange, because if it works the way it should work, then it works via dopamine. So in some sense, you could say that it's in some sense works a bit like a psychostimulant, which can also, in some cases, for some people, have the same effects, whether it's prescribed psychostimulants or street psychostimulants, right? So if people try to get through the day on cocaine, for example, they would have to constantly take that cocaine, because otherwise they will crash after half an hour, right?
Right.
And there are also people where the dose of Adderall, for instance, is wrong, or where it's not extended release or something, where people also get that crash. That's a lot of children. I've heard parents complain about that the children work well on Adderall during the day, but then they come home and then they fall asleep before dinner. So So it's probably a common problem with these sort of psychostimulants, and even coffee can have that problem, right? You might need your extra afternoon coffee because you had your morning coffee, which worked well, but then after lunch or sometime in the afternoon, you're crashing, and so you need your coffee and maybe a little carb on the side. So yeah, so that's that. But we also wanted to mention that, of course, you can over-the-counter medications can, of course, be unreliable because they're not really FDA approved in the sense of clinical trials. And so your doctor may be able to prescribe other kinds of drugs to supplement the SSRI. And one recent drug that has been promoted on the television and so on is actually an antipsychotic drug, Abilify.
Oh, right.
And Abilify is an atypical antipsychotic medication, but there are some people that have good results using it with a standard antidepressant. And so they get a small dose of Abilify with the antidepressant. And of course, the problem is that it may make people extremely tired because even though it's an atypical antipsychotic, antipsychotics are kind of tranquilizers in the sense that they partially block dopamine. So if you already have the kind of depression where you're already kind of tired, it's probably not the right way to go.
Right.
Um, yeah. So how would you go about asking your doctor for either the initial antidepressant or the thing to supplement your antidepressant with, if that's the route you want to take?
Well, I mean, I think that the key is to have a doctor you trust, and a good doctor should be able to either help you through the process or refer you to someone who can. I've heard from people that some doctors are of the mindset that mental medication is not something to try, but if the other methods aren't working, I mean, obviously you have to do something to fix the problem. So I know I have an internal medicine doctor who's very open minded, but also is I think smartly involves a specialist when the questions he had when the questions I have kind of exceed what his training is in. So you have to find that balance.
Yes, yeah. So that's a good idea. And it can also be if people have a the standard general physician and they're quite happy with that person. It can be that person can recommend another person, a specialist, because it may not be that you just need another doctor. It may be that you do need a specialist in some cases. It may depend, of course, on how severe the depression is. Um, but what do you think of? We're mostly talking about medication here. But what do you think of using therapy either together with medication or instead of medication? What do you believe in therapy for that, or do you think that it's mostly overrated?
Well, I think that both work. I mean, I think that we know that that kind of the way we think and the way we consciously think about our emotions affect the chemistry of our brain, but the chemistry of our brain affects our emotions and our thinking as well. So I think that a lot of times, just like with more physical disorders, you'll treat, say, high cholesterol with good diet and exercise, and you'll treat it with a statin or some other sort of blood pressure medication. You might do the same in the mental realm. And sometimes you might need more therapy than medication, or you might need more medication than therapy. But that's something that a good psychiatrist or psychologist could help you figure out.
Yes, a lot of people are sort of they're a little bit against going to a therapist because of the very, very old-fashioned stigma that surrounded being in therapy. Of course, if you're in Miami or in New York, you're sort of weird if you don't have a therapist.
Right.
Which I don't currently have, so I'm kind of in the weird group that doesn't have therapists because even if you function well, you're supposed to have a therapist or 3 of them. But in other parts of the country, people might still be attached to that stigma that's around it. But something that we will talk about in the future is also that it is a little bit odd that we treat therapy the way we do because, I mean, as you just mentioned, I mean, if you wanna say you wanna strengthen your muscles, right? You're not gonna just take a drug to do that, right? You're also going to go exercise your muscles. If you want to be better in school, you're not just going to take a drug. There's no drugs yet, even though we describe various in our book, the Superhuman Mind. But you're also going to study to be better. And so, what about emotions? Yeah, maybe you also need some exercise for your emotions in addition to the drugs that you can take. So, but that will be something for future episodes. And yeah, I think we should call that a day for today.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was
good to chat with you again, Kristian.
Yes, good to see you.
All right, we'll be back next week, and keep an eye on the Superhuman Minds channel, YouTube channel, and we'll announce well in advance what the topic for the next week's YouTube episode will be. All right, take care. Bye.